Yeah. Huh? I'll stop now. I'll stop share now.
Welcome. I hope everyone is able to hear me. I'm going to welcome Omar and Alicia to join me on screen. Wonderful. Welcome, I'm Lindsay Baker, Executive Director of Maryland Humanities. I'm going to be giving a short introduction and then tossing it over to Alicia. At Maryland Humanities, we're passionate about making the humanities a part of everyday life. Our statewide programming uses the humanities to explore our ideas, stories, and values to foster understanding among people with diverse perspectives and to strengthen our ability to interact meaningfully. I invite you to take a moment to learn more about our wide-ranging work by visiting mdhumanities.org. And of course, I would be shirking my executive director duties if I did not say that I hope you will consider clicking on the donate button at the top of our website homepage when you visit. We are an educational nonprofit, and like many of you in the audience today, our work is made possible through the generosity of our donors. I'm so excited you could join us virtually this morning or listen to the recording later. This event is the first of our Beyond Statements, Leading Racial Equity in Humanities organization series. At a time when many organizations have put out public statements in support of Black Lives Matter and in opposition to white supremacy, dismantling our organizational inequities remains an elusive next step for many. As we at Maryland Humanities dig into operationalizing racial equity within our own organization, we thought we would benefit from hearing from leaders in the field. We wanted to share that opportunity with our colleagues in Maryland and beyond. For this series, we have leaders from Maryland who will speak to the efforts they have led in their respective organizations. I'm thrilled that we have almost 400 registrants for today, so it seems many of you agreed this was a great opportunity. Today's duo includes two people whose work I know well and who I deeply admire. Our moderator, Alicia Jones-McLeod, is the Executive Director of Challenging Racism, an organization whose focus is to empower and inspire people to disrupt racism one compassionate conversation at a time. Previously, she led the Ellicott City Partnership, a Main Street organization. Prior to that, she founded the Maryland Black Chamber of Commerce, which continues to raise the profile of Black-owned businesses. Her tenure at each of these places of employment has been marked by the implementation of innovative ideas designed to raise the organization's profile and draw new supporters to the work. McLeod is a resident of Parkville and brings deep relationships to Challenging Racism's work. And she joined the board of Maryland Humanities in fall of 2020. Great addition. Our speaker today, Omar Eaton-Martínez, is what I like to refer to as a museum superstar. And I know many of you on this call know that. Currently, Omar is the Assistant Division Chief of Historical Resources for the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, Natural and Historical Resources Division, Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County. I hope I got it, Omar. He leads the Prince George's County Historical Resources, which include historical house museums, an aviation museum, the Black History Program, and archaeological parks. He also oversees the programming of those sites with an emphasis placed on preserving, sustaining, and enhancing these resources, as well as engaging and building communities through education, outreach, and innovation. He has led a leading role in Museums and Race, Transformation and Justice, a movement to challenge and reimagine institutional policies and systems that perpetuate oppressions in museums since 2016. Moreover, he contributed to the Museums as Site for Social Action project, which seeks to align museums with more equitable and inclusive practices. And Omar has served on many boards, too many to name in our short time together, but his two most recent appointments were to be an American Alliance of Museums Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, Inclusion Senior Fellow, which is dedicated to diversifying museum boards, and a gubernatorial appointment to the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I know Alicia and Omar are going to have a great conversation, and I'm thankful to join in, and I'm so thankful you all were able to join us and listen in today. Before I turn it over to Alicia, I'm going to cover a very few couple housekeeping items. First of all, this event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube page. Second of all, I see you guys are loving the chat. Keep going, keep doing your thing over there. But if you want to ask a question, it needs to go in the Q&A, not the chat function. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, and I will disappear for a while they have a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I really appreciate being a part of this today. And I'm so excited to get started with Omar, but I just wanted to also thank Andrea, who is behind the scenes being the Zoom master. So anyone that's ever done this kind of work knows how important it is to have someone that's controlling everything in the back end so that we can focus on this great conversation today. So thank you guys. And Omar, I'm just gonna start this by saying I have no idea how you even found time to do all of this with the resume that you just brought on. You are so active in so many areas. So thank you so much for your time today. You ready to get started?
I absolutely am, and I'm excited to be here with you.
Awesome, awesome. So I wanted to start the conversation by asking you for your definition of racial equity that you use in your work.
So the way I jump into this work of racial equity is I always kind of go back to what pricked me in my positionality, right? I'm a Black Puerto Rican man who grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland. Was born in DC, raised in Silver Spring, Maryland. Have lived in places like New York and Atlanta. And I always go back to like how inequities have affected me. And then I kind of use that as sort of a springboard to think about racial equity as a lens to the work. And the way I think we've been able to manifest it at the commission and other things that I'm involved with is to look at racial equity as an opportunity to understand that everyone, no matter how they identify racially or ethnically, deserves not just a seat at the table, but active and engaged voices. And really, racial equity does not mean a whole lot unless we are really trying to transform that into justice. And that's really that's what I'm focused on as much as anything else. Obviously we evoke these words a lot in our field: diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. But I think over the last couple of years in particular, I'm really focused on how do we use those lenses to really create a framework of justice for our work and for our communities. There are so many people that need different accommodations, and it's not about giving equal parts to everyone. When somebody needs 100 pieces of wood to stay warm, and somebody may need 15 pieces. And we have to recognize that without evoking this scarcity mindset that usually creates a barrier for us to even give up the privileges that we have for other people to have the same privileges. And so those are the types of things that sort of manifested in my mind when I think about how do we address racial inequities in our work.
And let me just comment on a couple of things that you said, because I think they are really important. Is that one, equity and defining it as equity means that we're not giving everything to everyone at the same rate, right? It means that we need to give more to people that have less in order to level the playing field. Am I understanding what you're saying correctly?
That's exactly how I look at it, yes.
Okay, because I definitely want to make sure that people get that point about a definition of equity versus other things that we've talked about in the past. And I want to go on to one other point that you made, is that you seem to have grown up in a very diverse community. So I'm also lived in Silver Spring, and Silver Spring has a lot of everyone from everywhere, which is what makes it great. But then moving to other areas, how has that changed your lens? Living in other areas that maybe weren't as diverse?
It's a really great question. I think the most I wouldn't say shocking, but most abrupt change for me when I was living in Atlanta, Georgia. In Atlanta, Georgia, during the times that I was down there was sort of what some people have even called this reverse migration. I mean, it's always had a fair amount of people coming from different parts of the country who are African descent because of the HBCUs there, and of course, there's corporations and other good work to get into. But what I really saw down there that I found a bit disruptive was it was a hyper scenario of this black and white binary. And when I mean black and white, I mean like African American and white American binary. And there wasn't much room for people who didn't fit into that binary. And not to say that it's perfect in Maryland or even perfect in New York, as many people know about the diversity in New York City. But I mean, over there was just a couple of steps above that. And for me, that was hard because it was in a point in my life where I was actually trying to make meaning of my identity as a scholar. I was down there in the graduate program at Clark Atlanta University and studying African American studies, but understanding that I was looking at the Afro-Latinidad of what it is to be Black in the United States. And so because I was doing such a deep dive in that, I think I felt it a little sharper than maybe others.
Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing that, because I think context is important. And some people are leading organizations where they have that dichotomy where it's this or this. And some people may be leading in a blended organization or in a blended community where they need more tools. So thank you for sharing that. I also want to ask you about how you're envisioning leading this work through your organization's racial equity efforts. So to share with us what your leadership looks like and what your organization's racial equity framework looks like.
Well, I think right now we're still, in development of that framework. Right now, what we're doing is in our division, in the Natural and Historical Resource Division, we have settled on 4 strategic pillars that we have been evoking in a lot of our work. And I'll pull up a couple of them so that I can read them to you directly, so that I don't misquote them for consistency's sake. But we have 4 of them, and basically one is to enhance the visitor experience, both quality and quantity. The other one is to strengthen inclusivity, diversity, and belonging. The third is leave a legacy, transforming education into activism. And then the last one is act with honesty, integrity, respect, and trust. And so in earnest, about a year ago, at this time, we actually launched these 4 pillars at the division level. And we started to engage all of our staff members, from the managers to part-time folks, who all have been equally important to the success of our sites and the different programs that we do. And so since then, we started to get more feedback from our staff and feedback from other stakeholders. And we realized we really need to kind of hone down and go through like a more formalized process around this. The way that we have been able to evoke it with some success is during COVID. It just so happened I had an opportunity to hire a slew of managers and other career positions that we had available in the division. And so we were able to use those pillars in our job descriptions and as a rubric to actually gauge like what kind of leader would actually be able to enact these 4 pillars. And so I think it was a good starting point for us to really get people in place so that we can build out this framework that we're gonna start building this year.
Wow. So starting with the 4 pillars, I think that that's important to kind of phase your work in when you're doing some of this operationalizing racial equity, that it's hard to do it if you don't have that really strong framework. So I want to applaud you on that, because that does seem to be the first step. So is this going to turn into a plan, whether informal or formal? Is that kind of what you're looking to do? And then what is the timeline? Are you looking at this taking place over the course of a year, over months, over a decade? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think what we want to start doing is start as soon as next month. And which is we have engaged a wonderful human being by the name of Randy Korn, who has written a lot about intentional leadership and creating impact plans. And so we are going to softly start this journey with her virtually with our group over the next several months. And then we hope, in anticipation of us being able to meet together, because we really felt strongly at the division level that in order for us to engage this work with any type of success and any type of meaningfulness, that we prefer to do this in the same room, right? And right now, obviously, we cannot do that. And so we're hoping that maybe in October, maybe mid to late October, we'll be able to do that safely. And we all know that that's sort of up in the air. We're not really sure, but we felt like we had to set a goal so that we can start moving forward. And so right now our goal is to have 3 meetings virtually with Randy to introduce the impact plan and how we're going to proceed in doing it. And then we're going to engage into these workshops, these much more intensely involved engagements with Randy, hopefully in person by mid to late October. And I think that process could take up to a year.
I will tell you that one of the challenges with that I have found in this work is that doing things on Zoom is what we need to do in order to reach masses, right? In order to reach a lot of people, it's important to be able to use the technology. But something about the touch and the face-to-face interaction, and we're in the same room and we're looking each other eye to eye, um, brings a brings a softness to the work, maybe, and these tough conversations, that you're able to see the humanness in someone else. So I commend you on waiting for this work to be able to really take hold in an in-person arena, because that really is, I mean, I would not want to have difficult conversations even with people that I love over Zoom if I didn't have to, right? Like, it's a tough way to start the conversation
It's
and to
true.
level set.
It's true. And I don't want to, and I agree with all that, but I will say this, because we have such good partners in this area, we were able to actually talk to some members at the Akakik Foundation who had just been going through this process, and Randy is on their board. And so we talked to Laura Ford and Shamika Berry, and they graciously gave us time to allow us to just ask them what was on our minds in terms of the process. And they were very honest and very transparent of the difficulties, but they were also very uplifting in the impact that they've already seen as a result of it. And so that really got us excited. I think how we definitely share a lot of similarities within our organizations and the work that they do at Akakik and the work that we do in our division. But I think what's a little bit different is that because we have so many sites that are scattered throughout Prince George's County, and I know that they have multiple things going on as well, but we have on nature side, we have several sites. On the history side, we have several sites, anything from the top of Laurel all the way down to the Piscataway. And so we felt like we needed to bring people together in a more, for lack of better words, traditional sense, where we're actually in the same room. But of course, we want to do that safely. We're not going to push it. And so, but we also felt like we had to say, okay, we're going to do this by when. Like, we understand that this whole year has been a whole year of uncertainty, but at the same time, we have to kind of put our foot down and try to plan and create deadlines so that we can actually move forward. Because as you know, when you don't have any deadlines, or when you have 20 million priorities, you have none. And so we're trying to be smarter and more strategic about our work. And so that's what we decided to do.
And really putting in deadlines and a plan is, that's the hard part. Not that talking to people and connecting with them isn't difficult, but it would be presumed that you have some relationship with the people that you're working with. So the plan and putting in the hard deadlines is really the part that a lot of people struggle with, I think. Is saying, how do we approach this and how do we move it forward?
Absolutely. And as I shared earlier, we have a lot of new managers that are coming on the history side and the nature side. And so it's even more important for us. I mean, we've had managers who've been with us for 6-9 months who still haven't seen other managers yet, and of course, that's not what we're used to. And so, this type of work that has that level of intimacy, as much as we've been able to hold on to through Zoom and Microsoft Teams, we thought like we should just make sure that it's a nice, secure, safe, and brave space for people to engage. And so that's why we decided to do that.
Now, can you also tell me or share maybe what the biggest challenges that you've been through with this work?
Oh, well, I think like in the recent years, it's hard to deal with people who react with either white fragility or male fragility or any other type of dominant culture fragility that you can name. For me personally, as a leader and just as a person, that is the toughest thing to deal with for me. I feel sometimes that this type of fragility can be weaponized against doing this work. And so I've built a little bit of a sensitivity to it, but I've also tried to humble myself and understand that Everybody is different. Everybody is not coming to this work at the same level. I've learned
Yeah.
that lesson many, many different times doing this work, that we cannot approach this work with a monolithic solution when the problem is systemic, which implies that it's nuanced. And so we have to be able to be flexible. And although it may prick me a certain way, it doesn't give me the right to shut it down. I have to understand what it is, and I have to be able to create strategies to address it. And that's what I try to do on a day-to-day basis.
And, I'll share with you that being a person of color leading the work within an organization, even if a person that's not a person of color leading the work, it is really important to bring some neutrality to the work. It's really important to bring some, I don't need you to see my side, I need you to see the right thing. I need you to understand that this is important because it's important for all of us. And sometimes that's difficult if you're feeling emotional and challenged with the things that are going on around you. So I've been in that situation as well, and it can be hard. It can be really hard, especially because you're the leader of the work, but you're also you're working with your colleagues and everything to do the work as well. So I'm gonna ask you, do you do any like self-care? Do you do anything to kind of take yourself out of the work and just be able to say,
Sure, sure. I
phew?
mean, you know, I guess I don't necessarily refer to myself in this way, but I mean, some people may refer to me as a man of faith, and um, uh, you know, I pray. You know, I I'm a Christian, so I go to the Bible, not to impugn my beliefs on other people, but that's what I do. And I find great solace in that. I find great solace in my family, in my spouse and my wife and my kids. Um, they always challenge me. It's funny because as challenging as this work can be, for me, there's nothing more challenging than raising children, and I have 4 of them. And so white fragility, bring it, because I got 4 kids right here who challenge me every day, every minute.
Right.
And
That you're
and we had
homeschooling and doing all kinds of other stuff. It's like,
right, we
come
had
for
we
me.
had the audacity to homeschool them and to teach them to have a mind and to be thinkers.
Mhm.
We have the audacity to do that, and now we get to pay the price of that choice every day.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. Having kids is definitely can definitely be challenging, especially during COVID, but also with all the things that are going on in the world. Um, so I want to ask you what you think your biggest win is, and don't be modest because we have heard your bio, so we know that you've had some tremendous wins. But what is your biggest win in this work so far, maybe?
I'm very happy and pleased with um, the way we've been able to recruit during COVID. I think for me, there's nothing better than to change or to add on to, not change, but to add on to the foundation of the work we're doing.
Right.
Big splashes are great. Programs that bring a lot of people are great. But like when you're laying stuff brick by brick down and laying down that foundation, I think there's no better way than to do it by hiring, good people, people who fit our strategic pillars and the vision that we have for this work. And we have done that. We have had we've had at least 8 hires,
Wow.
career hires, and 6 out of those 8 were managers. And I would say that most of them were people of color. And I think that what we tried to do here was try to disrupt the idea um, that people who do this work are a monolith. There are people who do this work successfully for years with training all over these United States. And because we work with the Department of Parks and Recreation, who has done a great job in allowing us to manage up and teach them about our field, because it's pretty different from Parks and Rec in terms of the mainstream of what we think Parks and Rec is, that we've been able to do this work. We've been able to cast a wider net
Yeah.
We have hires who have come to us from out of region. That was sort of not really what they've done before. Good, bad, and different. Not that they didn't have great people that came from the region, but I mean, we had cast a wider net so that we could also level up and allow us to really, um, really get the word out to people of all types of diverse backgrounds, race, racial ethnicities, and other intersectional identities that you don't normally see in those positions. And so, I mean, we have our new director of College Park Aviation Museum came from California. The deputy director before him came from South Carolina. We've had two people come from Missouri. We have people coming from in the region. So we just casted a wider net. We were able to use the networks like the American Alliance of Museums, the Association of African American Museums, the American Association for State and Local History, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and just cast a wider net. And I think it's worked out wonderfully for us.
And now the people that you have coming on now, I know that they'll be involved in this racial equity work going forward, but how do you plan on incorporating that when you bring new people on in the future? So what's your plan to keep it going when people are coming on and they're not right at the cusp of the work beginning, like the people that are coming on now are?
Well, I think if I understand your question correctly, I mean, I think what we would like to do is when we're hiring people that we are being very forthright about what we hope, the type of professional we hope to get for that position. And that's why I think we were able to achieve a certain level of success with these recent hires, because we were really wearing our hearts on our sleeve on that job description. I could have easily taken sort of the cookie cutter job description that our human resources department has developed, because it's kind of easy just to kind of plug and play and then you kind of hope for the best, right? But instead, what we did was we implemented these words. We implemented words like inclusivity, diversity, and belonging. We put words like activism. And I know that was shocking for some people. But as a result, we were able to actually have a stronger lens and get people to come in who actually had a level of competency, at least could demonstrate to us through the interview process, they had a level of competency to do that work. And so, not to say that all the work is done in the hiring, we definitely have to onboard people into the vision. But I think part of it is when we're onboarding these new people is that we're also giving them voice in some of these decisions.
Yes.
Right now, especially because we're getting ready to do this new impact plan, it's a great time to do that work. Now, for people who come after the impact plan, I think it's going to be incumbent upon us to really think about the lessons learned through that process, and then apply those lessons learned in whatever hires we do after that. And that I don't know, because we're still going through that process right now.
Yeah, I think just saying that the way that you put your job descriptions together. So I don't know if you can see the chat, but it was shared from your job descriptions, the 4 pillars that you shared earlier in the conversation, because it was on the job description. Like doing things like that is really how we keep the work in the forefront. Saying that this is what we're standing for, and you're coming to join us, so you're going to stand for this too. Like this is where we are, and that's important. It's putting the racial equity work right into the forefront. So I also want to ask you, do you have a resource or something that you have come across in this work that you said, you know what, that is something that I really like, whether that's a podcast or a book or a quote or something that just in this work has been significant to you that you'd like to share?
Well, I mean, my network, my colleagues, the people that I've been able to really, be entirely blessed to know. I mean, there's just so many people and so many networks, from the associations that I mentioned to the ones that were mentioned in my introduction, like Museums and Race and Museums as a Site for Social Action. We have built a familial connection through that work together. And you can't help but do that, because when you're taking a stance like that, it's not for the faint-hearted. And you're going to see quickly who's about this work and who's not. And you're going to learn personally about people. Like you can't do this work and be on the sidelines. You have to be in the trenches. And so when you're in the trenches and you're in that foxhole with that person, you get to know them pretty intimately, pretty quickly. And because I've been able to, have access to those types of relationships, those women and men build me up every day. And even if I'm not talking to them, just the things that they produce through scholarship, through blogs, even through social media, we follow each other, we engage with each other. Sometimes we meet informally in different social media spaces that may be private, and we talk about problems, And I think that's the type of work that allows us to do that self-preservation that you asked about earlier, and also allows us to really share next practices and things that may be working for us that can be applicable and scalable to our individual organizations.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, because you're right. It is helpful to have a network of people that kind of can boost you up and keep you connected, and kind of see the world in a similar way that can give you ideas. That's very important. And I want to ask you a little bit about, when we started the conversation, we talked about putting out a statement versus like doing the work, right? Like there are two things that happened when the murder of George Floyd hit the papers and hit the consciousness of this country. One was that every organization was putting out a statement. Everybody, people I ain't never heard of, like why are you commenting on this? But they were putting out statements. And then second, we heard from organizations that really had well thought out ideas about putting out a statement. And now it's coming to a point where people are trying to connect that to the work. So I want to ask you what you guys did in that process, and then how is that connected to where you are now?
Well, I will say there's certainly been a lot of performative acts being made over the last year. It's
Mm,
it's a little bit exhausting. I know there's a lot of good people out there who've taken the time to document this, and thank God for them, because I think we do need to hold people accountable, and we do need to learn lessons from this. And I think if we're not documenting this, then we're not going to be in the best position to do that. For our work in our division at the Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County, we've always, I mean, we've always been forward thinking about this type of work, and it hasn't been easy, right? Because there's certainly, I mean, when you do this work maybe one way or a couple of ways for many years, and then there are new ideas introduced. I mean, I think it's obvious and almost expected that there's going to be, I guess, pushback, for a lack of better words, or maybe not pushback, maybe just extra questions about why are we going this direction, and those types of things. And I think those are good, actually. I mean, sometimes depending on what type of mood you're in that day, you may not want to hear it, but I mean, I think it's always good, because I don't think people are doing it to get on your nerves. I think they're doing it because they actually are genuinely concerned about maybe this direction. And I think I always assume and hold my colleagues in the highest, and they've never given me a reason not to. And so when they ask me those questions, it just makes my thinking about it better, because then I actually can give it some thought, sit down with them, have a nice, intimate, professional conversation about it. We can really get to the heart of the matter. And I think we've been able to do that. It'll be 3 years for me in May. And I mean, I think when we talk about the work that we've done here, is that because we've been able to have these conversations and move this forward, we've been able to really dig into things that might be missing, and dig into who we partner with and who don't we partner with, and why, right? We've really been focused on inclusive interpretation and community engagement, and how those two entities really are interlocked. I mean, we word them and list them in a way that they could be perceived as separate, but we understand better that those things are interlocked. You cannot do inclusive interpretation without being engaged with your community. You can't. And so because now we have that consensus understanding, we've been able to start to move forward with some newer ways of doing this type of work. And because of that, by the time we got around to COVID and the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, our division was better positioned to address that, I believe. And even in some of the department-wide trainings and interactions, it's come up several times, and people have pointed to the work that we've been able to do before that happened and while that happened. One of the things that we were able to do a little bit differently this past year was our Juneteenth celebration, which normally sees 5,000 to 6,000 people in Watkins Regional Park. We went virtual. And usually that celebration is an opportunity to celebrate Black culture and Black history and Black art. And it's much more celebratory and not necessarily focused on sort of the traumatizing aspects of our Black. It's usually about Black joy, right? But we thought it was really important, and thanks to the leadership of Dr. Dennis Dostert, our Black History Program Manager, and Artura Jackson, and our whole Juneteenth committee, that taking the opportunity to address what happened was really important, since it was just after that, and so what we did was we put together a panel called I Can't Breathe, and we had we didn't just have other museum professionals or historians. We had people who were social scientists, who were psychologists, who talk about intergenerational trauma. We had historians and Africana studies scholars who talk about the intercultural impact of all this racial violence. We had our very own Park Police Chief, Stanley Johnson, who's an African-American man, talk about the complexities of being a Black man and being in law enforcement for all his career. We had student activists who are from the county who fight issues like this all the time. And we even had, I had to brag on it, my daughter, who came in and did her poem, I Can't Breathe, which has since won awards. And so we were able to do that type of work. And I think one of the ways that the commission answered it, though, which is really much more directed to your question, is they put together a resolution. And the resolution, I would tell you, Alicia, I feel like is one of the best statements that I've ever read from an organization about this work. And I think it's reflective of who we are. The Department of Parks and Recreation, Prince George's County, is probably one of the largest departments that I've ever worked for that actually reflects the geographic community that it serves. So anyone from, a teenage seasonal employee to our chairman are filled with Black and brown people. I mean, you have African American, Afro Latinos, you have Latinos of all kinds of ethnicities, Asian American, Native American. We have it all, And so the idea, because usually the first critique for, like, when you're looking at Nike or these other big companies that put these Black Lives Matter things, you're looking at their board, you're looking at their governance, right? Well, if you look at our board and our governance, I mean, you're not going to, at least visibly with your eyes, see anything the matter there. I mean, it's filled with people of color. Now, do we have work to do around equity and accessibility and inclusion? Absolutely, we all do. We all do. But what I'm super proud of with the resolution that they drafted was that they used historical context to build their statement, which, as a public historian and museum professional, we were extremely excited about. And they got the signatures of all of the leadership. And we have leadership that are appointed by elected officials. So that was extremely important, very extremely important. We're not just talking about civil servants. We're talking about people who are appointed by the people. And we were able to do that. And I don't know if it's appropriate. I mean, I could read it if you want me to, but I mean, I don't know if we have time for that.
We have it in the link. So
oh, you do?
Lindsay
Okay, good.
The
As long as they can
is
see it.
showing links in the chat. Yes.
All right. Good.
That we
And I want to give
see,
credit very quickly to Adrian Gardner, who is our general counsel. He was the main drafter of the resolution, and I got to sit down with him recently to talk about his experience. And it was just magical what he described to me. Not to say it wasn't with push and pull and discussion and things like that, but they were able to work it out, and they were able to produce something that was powerful, that was historically based, and it had all the signatures on it. And so I'm very proud of that.
And let me just say, we do have to transition in just a moment to Q&A for the audience, which I understand that there's lots of questions for you. So there'll be that'll be a very interesting part as well. But I wanted to say that I heard you mention accountability and representation and a lot of key items in that last statement. And I will say there were amens and high fives all throughout the chat, because people really do understand that you can't just start this work cold turkey and then expect it all to be done in 15 minutes, that it's a process. And you guys have started the process, a long time ago. So when things came up, you were able to make a statement that wasn't just words or performance, but it really was where you were at the moment. It was speaking from, from where you were and what you wanted to see done. So we really do appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to the Q&A from the audience. And of course, the first one, I'm just saying you have definitely proven to be, not just from your resume, but also talking to you today, someone that has great vision from the organization, for the organization that you run and the work that you do. But what do you do when someone that doesn't have that power, isn't the leader of the organization? How can they do that work? Is there any way for them to support, like the managers that you're bringing in, the people that are coming in? How do they get involved and do this work if maybe the leadership is not as gung-ho about it? What can you do there?
Well, I didn't always work for the Department of Parks and Recreation. I mean, I would just say that, you have to find other people who are like-minded. Here's the key. That means you have to cast a wider net. That means that person may not work with you at all, right? That means now in 2021, with the way that we engage with each other through social media, through Zoom, through other virtual means, there's a lot more opportunity to engage that way. There are people, like organizations like Museums and Race. If you go onto their website, you go onto Facebook and you put a question out there, you want to reach out to somebody. I mean, 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, somebody from that steering committee is going to reach out to you. And sometimes that may be through back and forth on whatever you posted, or if you wanted to, exchange numbers and send a Zoom link, they'll probably do that too. I know I've done that. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for people to be able to engage who are not in positions of authority, or may have people above them who are in positions of authority who may not be so apt to do this work. I think in the past, in different agencies that I work for, I've always been able to cultivate relationships with people who had more influence than I did, and sometimes that took a lot of time, and sometimes it was very quick. But I think when people understand that there is a spirit of the matter, if there's a heart of the matter, that everything is not so cut and dry and so extremely overly pragmatic, that there's a reason why we have a protocol, and there's a reason why we have a process, not just the process and the protocol in itself, then people seem to be a little bit more amenable to engaging in these conversations. You have rules about everything, from the type of ink that you use to the type of leave that you can take. And there's always a lot of thought into those processes and protocols. Ask questions. I think the best thing you can do is learn how to be a critical question asker, for lack of better words. And when you continue to ask those questions, I think it pricks people. Now, I'll be honest with you, for all you out there, you guys know, I'm gonna be very transparent with you. When you prick people, it goes both ways. You can prick people and engage them and they'll be enrolled, or you can prick people till they alienate you to no end, right? But I think it's about being courageous in this work. And certainly I pricked people in ways that were negative, and I had to deal with those consequences. But I had to be brave in this work. And because the people that came before me, the people whose shoulders I stand on, were brave in this work. And so I just encourage you to be courageous.
I'll say that two of the things that I say in almost every program that we do is that we need brave leadership. Brave leadership allows people that are in the organization that feel as though their entry level is their first day, they're coming in, that they can step up and ask questions. But if you don't have brave leadership, it can be challenging. So making sure that people understand that as leaders, you must be brave. And you must be the one that's willing to step out there and start asking the questions and really putting that eye to everything so that other people can feel like they can follow in your footsteps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been times in my career where I had to make some tough choices, and not everything was because of discrimination or something like that. Sometimes it was just things that were happening, and I've been unemployed. I've been unemployed, married with children before. Being quite
Mhm.
honest with you about that, it's not easy, right? And so then you start really feeling vulnerable in those situations. And I know some of the people on this call may understand that very vividly. But what I'm saying to you, um, my encouragement to you is to stand your ground, stand your principles. Things will work out. Um, and that's what I was able to do. And by the grace of God, I've been able to overcome some of those, and I'm still overcoming those things. I mean, it puts a smile on my face that people, find value in my career trajectory and the things that I've been able to share with you all today. But please understand that I'm still going through it. This because this is the system that we're in. This until we dismantle the system that we're in and build something that's more equitable, we're always going to be suffering to a certain level. And so I think, if anything, when I talked about earlier about going from diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion to justice, that's what justice means to me, to remove these inequitable barriers and create an equitable framework for all of us to thrive.
Wow, Omar, thank you for sharing that. I have another question for you. What are the strategies you use to address colleagues, stakeholders, visitors who are demonstrating white fragility or male fragility? I'm just saying, that's not funny, but I'm just
No,
saying that
it's a good question
sometimes
because
I'm
I
just
mean,
like, step back, like just leave me alone. Today's
yeah,
not the day. Right.
no, I love this because I've been very blessed and privileged to be asked to speak about these things quite a bit, and
Right.
I always get questions like this, like, because people want to know, like, what's the how, like, how do I do this, right? and
Yes.
and I get it, man. Like, you want to know how, and what I'm telling you is there is no one way, and some of the growth is digging into what the how is, right? And certainly we can talk about de-escalating and things like that. I mean, we can talk about de-escalating. We can talk about talking to people in a common voice. We can talk about putting it back on people with very critical but strategic questions, and that way you'll get people to think more. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that means it's going to resolve their right fragility in one conversation, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just something we have to deal with as professionals, and we have to allow those experiences to inform us in the future. But I cannot give you a 1, 2, 3 how to deal with that situation, because every situation is like a snowflake.
Be different.
But I mean, but I think if I find any solutions for you all to look at things about de-escalation, and you can even look at de-escalation from the most extreme situation and gain a process from that. You can look at things about how to be an empathetic leader and look at what empathy means, and putting yourself in somebody else's shoes so that you can, at least for a moment, try to understand their pain and frustration. Because I don't always think I don't think white fragility just comes from thin air. It comes from a place of lack. It comes from a place of a scarcity mindset, like something is being taken away from somebody. Nobody likes to feel that way, right? So how do we address
Right.
that with critical questions that allow them to think about that in a more equitable manner?
Yes, and I mean, people are definitely high-fiving your diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. That might be one of the quotes of the day, because it is really important to make sure that we have the eye on the prize, and it's easy for people to remember. Like making these statements that organizations are supposed to live by that are 27 pages, no one's going to remember all the steps to that. Give them a couple of keywords so that they can remember and feel what it is that you want them to feel in doing this work. As opposed, so those 4 words are really, I think, a good way to start, is have that conversation with, what are our values? What do we value in this organization? And you've been very clear that those are the 4 tenets that you really value when you're talking to people about this work. So we appreciate that. Okay, starting the next question. What would you say is step 1 in starting the conversation I think we just kind of address that, or people that may not see it the way you see it. So not people that are coming into your organization and really not understanding why this display is here, or they don't really think that that's an issue. But how do you deal with people in the organization who feel like they're not supposed to, that this is not their work, like this is not something that they should do? Because that I know is something that people are dealing with, right?
Yeah,
I'm sure
absolutely.
you're not, because you're like the superstar leader,
No,
but
no,
the
no,
rest of
no,
us are
no,
talented.
man, please, I wish. No, I mean, but that's part of it. Like, I mean, I say I wish, but at the same time, man, I'm going to tell you straight up, like, that's part of it. Like, that's part of the process.
Yeah.
And I don't begrudge that all the way. Like, I mean, it's not like a nice thing to have to kind of frame for somebody that that's a reality, and people, because I mean, that's a fairly traumatic experience for a lot of people to have to deal with all the time. But
Yeah.
for me, I've positioned myself and I've thought about these things as an opportunity for growth and strength as an individual. And it's been helpful to frame things that way. Now, am I always successful in framing it? Do I get caught up in my frustration and feelings? Absolutely. Please don't mistake that. It's going to happen. You're going to get
Yes.
frustrated. You're going to get mad, right? But I mean, I think at this point in my career, I have been able to find ways to just kind of take a step back, think about it. Again, for me, like I may pray, or I may go to someone else with a problem that I know, or both, and talk it through a little bit, and that has helped me tremendously. But I think if there's any encouragement in all of this, it is to dig in. Like, do not be afraid. And when you feel beat down about it, please take a step back. That's
Yeah.
okay. You're not giving up. Like, you're just taking a break for yourself to gather yourself, do whatever you need to do to find that peaceful state, find that support, that emotional support, and then jump back in. Jump back in. And as you continue to build that protocol out for yourself, you'll see yourself getting stronger and stronger every time.
And I also want to say that people can probably follow you on some of the work that you're doing, because it's important, as people that are in the organization that are doing this work, that they have someone that they can kind of look up to, and say, okay, they're a little farther along than I am. They're in the front. I'm going to just look at what they're doing and maybe just, imitate it for a little bit. Fake it till you make it sometimes, really making sure for some of the people that are entry level in positions that they can look at some of the things that other organizations are doing and adopt that, and say, this is a way that they're handling this situation. Maybe I can do the same thing. And at least gives you a starting point, that it can be challenging to be out there and feel like you're out there by yourself.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think for me, one of the things that my muse and mother, Dr. Janetta Besh Cole, shared with me was that this African proverb that I'm sure people have heard her say maybe in some of her other lectures, but she said that if you want to if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, you go together. And so, the majority of the success of my career has been through building coalitions in some form or another, whether it's a formal MOU and partnership, or whether it's just cultivating a relationship with an organization that I know is like-minded without any type of paperwork. And I think that coalition building has allowed me not just forget about just being successful, just surviving. Because I can tell you that there's a lot of great people, and unfortunately, a lot of great people of color who leave this sector a lot because they don't feel like they can survive, and that breaks my heart. And so, I'm hoping that we can, through efforts like this one, help people understand that there are associations, that there are alliances, that there are groups where you can get together with people, share your ideas, share your frustrations, and be built up again.
And even hearing from visionary leaders like yourself, it has been a pleasure to chat with you today in this conversation. I thank you so much for your time. I have learned a lot. And as I can see from the chat, so have the people that have attended. I see Lindsay's back on the screen now. So I think she'll be closing us out. But Omar, I may call you right after this is finished so we can talk
I was going to tell you, I'm going to call you Miss
This is
Challenging
awesome.
Racism. You can't lead an organization saying challenging racism without me being a fan. So we're
Thank
connected
you
at the
so
hip
much.
now.
We're there. Thank you, Omar. And
All
back to
right.
you,
Thank
Lindsay.
you.
Thank you both. Two of my favorite people doing this work, getting to meet and chat and have people listen in. I can't ask for any more for a Monday morning. Thank you for making this happen. And thank you to Andrea. I want to reiterate what Alicia said for making this run so smoothly. Omar, you shared a lot about vulnerability that I actually haven't heard you speak on before. And I think it was really important because we did have a lot of people asking, how do you do this work when you're not at the top? So thank you so much. And also thank you for talking about networking, because I think you are the best networker I have ever met. And I think that a lot of us can learn from your example. So thank you.
Thank you,
To
Lynn.
our
Thank you for
audience,
inviting me.
what was that, Omar?
I said, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, well, you know, I'm always going to invite you. You just have to say yes every once in a while. To our audience, I hope to see you at our next two events on March 22nd and April 19th. The link for more information should be dropped in the chat, and please take a few moments to complete the survey, which you will receive in your after event email if I messed up the link in the chat. Thank you so much, Omar and Alicia and Andrea behind the scenes. And I look forward to the next one on March 22nd.
Me too.